This PowerPoint goes with chapters 1 through 3 in the Nexus book, our multimedia world, reading for understanding, and writing for understanding. Basically, the reading and writing is all about communication, and the chapters talk about how communication has changed drastically through the years. So it's obviously changed more than one could ever have imagined over the past 100 years, the telephone and such. But even in the past 30 years, it has changed so dramatically. The modes or methods of communication are completely different. You know, even back when I was in school, back in the 80s, and I first started teaching, it was face-to-face, handwritten notes. They would literally, students would pass notes back and forth. We had the landline phone, where it was miserable for teenagers. We had a landline phone with a big cord. If you were lucky, it had a long cord, and you can take that cord into the bathroom and have a private conversation. Most of the cords were a little tiny, and you were talking in front of the whole family. We had radio, newspapers that got black stuff, ink all over your clothes and your skin, the gossip through magazines. Tiger Beat was a big one in the 80s. Now you can just go online and get as much gossip as you can stand. The Walkman was a wonderful invention. We could listen to music on the go, like the boombox. However, the boombox was big and heavy. The Walkman, you had to carry along your cassettes to go inside them. In schools, we had the chalkboard, which was dusty and not permanent. Real books and the old VCRs. I do not remember the tape before the VCRs. I can't even think what they're called right now. But then today we look at it, and everything is just, we couldn't even have imagined or predicted or guessed what it was going to be like in today's society. We are at everybody's fingertips anytime we want to be. Cell phones have changed the world dramatically. We can text, so we don't even have to verbally speak. We can send short little messages and little quips just to get the message across. We don't have to talk for a long time. We've got the internet, which puts any information out to billions to see at one time. Twitter, you can talk to many people at one time and choose who you're going to listen to and who you're not. And of course, Facebook lets you talk to everybody, post your pictures, your visuals. The whole form is just so great and massive, completely different than it was. So we then, of course, have to change the way we do things in schools. So the Nexus textbook that we are using in class does not just deal with different genres of writing, and it is not just about one paper after the next paper after the next paper. We are going to be using different modes of communicating our thoughts. We are going to use multimodal activities where we will use visuals and sounds and the written word. A lot of the activities in this book relate with smaller, high-interest assignments instead of fewer long papers. There's many shorter assignments. I enjoyed this book. I think you will too. So even though the book encourages shorter multimodal projects, we still have the rhetorical modes, or the thought patterns for communicating information. So we still will be talking about description, narration, illustration, compare and contrast, and argument. I think those are the ones that we will get into, fit in this class. But so the genres are all still there. They're just going to be created in a different form. The communication will be delivered differently, not your traditional long paper. So the book is really basically all about thinking. And when we think, we are involving writing and reading, speaking and listening. So writing is putting information out there in script, while reading is receiving the information in script. Speaking is putting the information out there verbally, while listening is receiving that information verbally. The yellow rectangles around the side are the different modes in which that communication or thought can be delivered. We can deliver it sensory, through touch or feeling, through movement such as dance, visual, pictures and design, text, the written word, auditory, the sound, and technologically we can deliver it really using all of those different formats. Technology can deliver all of those modes. When we think, there are different levels. When we receive or give information, whether we receive it, learn it, or create it, there are different levels of thinking involved. So there is the literal level of thinking, where we are presenting information or gathering information word for word, as it is spoken in the text or as it is spoken in the sound. We think of it says. What does the source say to us? What does it speak to us? The second one is interpretation. It is how our take on the message is, how we interpret it, how we are receiving that information, and how we can take that and mix it around to get our own message from what's been delivered. That is kind of like the I say. So it says is the literal message from the text, and I don't mean necessarily written text. The I say is how we interpret that. And the third is the critical thinking, how we can apply that information, or how we can draw conclusions, or how we can make connections. It's the and so, like the big so what about it? So what are we going to do with this information then? So there is literal thinking, interpretation, and critical thinking. So now, based on the different modes of communication and the different levels of thinking, we're going to focus on the reading process. There are 3 stages within the reading process. The first stage is the pre-reading stage. It's what we do before you read. We look at that first line or two, the hook that tries to grab us. We look at the headings, especially in textbooks, you'll see headings throughout the chapters. We look in categories, or how things are grouped. We might look at the chapters. We might look at a review page. We might want to look at a review page in a textbook before we actually look through the content. And of course, that very first thing that we want to look at is the title. That's going to grab us immediately. I can see a book that might have great reviews and I don't like the title. I'm just going to put it down. Kind of bad with that. The second stage is the reading stage. Here we are reading for content. We can identify difficult vocabulary, we can make connections, and we apply what we already know to increase our knowledge, to increase our schema. So here we use those levels of thinking. We are going to reading what the literal word says. We are going to see what that means in our mind. We're going to interpret it. And then we're going to think, so what about that? What does that mean then? The third stage is rereading. This is when we have to go back over certain sections. We ask ourselves some questions. We want to identify confusing material or clarify what something may mean. We want to look at certain vocabulary words we were not sure of and maybe look some up or use the glossary or index in the textbook. We want to check the timeline. When did this happen? Before or after something else? And then we want to look at the main idea or the big picture, the message that the reading is trying to tell us. Page 10 in your Nexus book talks about reading different forms of media. So we want to read media being the way or mode that it is delivered. And these guidelines can be applied to the written word or visual, or it could even be applied when we're listening to information. So what is the topic or theme of the selection? What is the subject? What is the selection's format or vehicle of being communicated? What is the mode, like we talked about before? The genre, letter, story, photo, blog, website, dialogue, song, or audience. Who is the intended audience? Who is this directed toward? The context, or the circumstances surrounding the communication, why you are communicating. The rhetorical strategies. What techniques does the author use to communicate? Do they use patterns or repetitions, refrain, comparisons, characters, settings, and so forth? Are there any unique features of this that are exceptional or distinct from others? Maybe there's loud sound or unusual sound or vivid coloring. What point of view is it given in? What is the viewpoint of the author? What are they trying to show you? And the effect. What is the end result? What is the big so what? Does it do its job? So I'm going to have you do some practice with these skills. We're going to look at different forms of media. The first one we're going to look at is a visual, it's a picture on page 11, and we're going to see how all those reading essentials are geared toward that picture. So you can look at that and try to look at the girl sitting on the landscape and try to see on page 12 then how each of those special essential characteristics are affected or relate to that visual. And then we're going to do an article activity called the Bigfoot article, and those will be linked on the discussion board, and the directions will be there for you. During the Bigfoot article, we're going to be looking for the it says, I say, and so. So we're going to look for the it says, what does the text say, how is it delivered to us? The I say, so what is my interpretation of what that is? And so what conclusions can we draw? What connections can we make? So we are going to practice that, and it will be linked on the discussion board. So first, before you do that though, take a look at pages 10 through 12 and get a feel for those reading essentials.